I always thought marriage was supposed to be a partnership. Two people standing side by side, facing the world together. For nearly 18 years, I believed that was what I had. I believed in the promises whispered in the dark, the laughter shared over midnight coffee, the safety of knowing someone would always be there. But what I didn't know, what I could never have imagined, was that the man I trusted most was quietly rewriting our story, editing me out of his life like I was just a temporary chapter. It started with the little things, the kind of changes you almost don't notice until they've stacked high enough to block out the sun. Daniel stopped texting me during his lunch breaks. He used to send me silly memes or just a miss you while I was picking up groceries. That stopped. He started working late. At least, that's what he said. His cologne lingered on his shirts in ways it never had before, expensive brands I hadn't bought. I'd wake in the middle of the night to find his side of the bed cold, his excuses rehearsed. Too smooth. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. People grow, jobs get stressful, love evolves. But then I heard him. One night he was in the living room, and he thought I was asleep upstairs. His voice was soft, tender in a way I hadn't heard in months. I can't wait to start fresh. Just you and me, no baggage, a clean slate. I froze in the hallway, the shadows pressing against me like witnesses. He wasn't talking about me. He wasn't talking to me. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I pressed my palm against the wall just to steady myself. The man who had once told me I was his world was now promising someone else a life where I didn't exist. And in that moment, something inside me shattered. But the pieces didn't fall away. No, they sharpened. They became weapons. The next morning, I smiled at him as I poured his coffee. He didn't notice my hands trembling. He didn't notice the hollowness in my eyes. But I noticed everything, every glance at his phone, every slip of the tongue, every sudden meeting that stretched late into the night. And as he built his fantasy life, brick by brick, I started laying the foundation of my revenge. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to confront him in some messy explosion of tears. No, that's what he expected. That's the role he'd written for me, the discarded wife, humiliated and powerless. But I wasn't powerless. I had patience. I had intelligence. And I had 18 years of knowing exactly how Daniel thought. I started small, quiet. I learned his routines, where he slipped, where he grew careless. His laptop password was the same as it had always been. Our wedding date. I almost laughed when I typed it in, and the screen unlocked like a door swinging wide open. There they were, the emails, the hotel bookings, the plans he and her were making. He wasn't just cheating. He was relocating, transferring assets, selling off stocks. He was preparing to erase me completely, to walk into a new life with his mistress while I stood staring at the ashes of the old one. I copied everything. Every email, every bank statement, every hidden transfer. I bought a small encrypted hard drive and tucked it into the lining of my old purse, the one he never noticed. Each night, when he thought I was asleep, I added more. I wasn't just collecting proof of betrayal, I was building a case. And I wasn't alone. My sister Claire had always been sharper than anyone gave her credit for. She saw through people in ways I sometimes couldn't. One evening, when I finally broke down and told her, her face didn't crumple with pity. Instead, her jaw tightened. "So he thinks he can just cut you out?" "No, honey, that's not how this ends." Together, we mapped out possibilities: legal, financial, psychological. Claire had a friend who worked in real estate, another who'd gone through a messy divorce. Every piece of advice became another thread in my web. I was weaving something Daniel wouldn't see coming until he was already tangled in it. But revenge isn't just about evidence. It's about timing, about performance. If I moved too early, he'd find a way to slip free. If I waited too long, he might drain accounts, move money beyond my reach. So I watched him carefully. I listened. And then, one night, opportunity arrived on a silver platter. Daniel announced we'd be attending a gala. It was some charity event his company sponsored, a black tie evening filled with colleagues, friends, and investors. He was giddy about it, nervous even. I knew why. She would be there. The woman he'd been building his future with. He thought he was clever, that no one would suspect a thing. But I saw the gleam in his eyes, the anticipation. He wanted to parade, her in front of me, to test how much humiliation I could swallow before I cracked. That was his mistake. Because by then, I wasn't swallowing anything. I was starving for justice, for revenge. The night of the gala, I wore the red dress he hated. The one he said was too bold, too loud, too much. I wanted to be too much. I wanted every eye to fall on me, not him. My hair curled over my shoulders, lips painted the color of blood. When we entered the grand ballroom, chandeliers dripping, gold above us, I could feel the whispers start. And then I saw her. She was younger, of course. They always are. Her smile was sharp, practiced. She clung to his arm like she'd already won, like she believed she'd taken my place. For a flicker of a second, pain burned through me. But then I remembered the hard drive in my purse, the documents tucked neatly in a sealed envelope. This wasn't pain. This was power. Daniel introduced her casually, as though I was supposed to play along. This is Lauren, a colleague. Colleague. The word nearly made me laugh out loud. But I didn't. I just smiled, my teeth bright, my eyes colder than ice. Lovely to meet you. Dinner was a blur of clinking glasses, forced laughter, and Daniel's hand brushing hers under the table. He thought he was invincible, untouchable. But I wasn't here to fight. I wasn't here to cause a scene. I was here to set the stage. When the speeches began, Daniel took the podium. His voice was smooth, charming, the way it had been when he courted me all those years ago. But I wasn't the only one listening. Every investor, every colleague, every socialite in that glittering hall was watching him. And when he raised his glass to toast, I knew it was time. I stood, calm, graceful, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor as I made my way toward the stage. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered across his face, then fear, because he knew me well enough to recognize that smile, the one that never reached my eyes. I didn't take the microphone. I didn't need it. I slipped the sealed envelope onto the podium, right in front of him, my red nails tapping it once before I leaned close enough for only him to hear. You tried to erase me, but this erases you. His hand shook as he touched the envelope. Around us, the room stirred, whispers rising like smoke. I didn't wait. I turned, my dress swirling around me, and walked away. Each step felt like shedding chains, like breathing fire. That was the beginning. That was the moment Daniel realized his story wasn't his to write anymore. It was mine. And I was only getting started. Daniel didn't come home that night. When I slipped out of the gala and into the cold night air, my heels clicking against the pavement, I half expected him to chase me, to grab my arm, to demand answers, to hiss, threats through clenched teeth. But he didn't. He stayed behind, trapped on that stage, staring at the envelope like it was a ticking bomb. And maybe it was. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past like streaks of fire. My hands were steady on the wheel, though my pulse drummed so hard I could feel it in my throat. The envelope hadn't even contained the worst of it, just a taste. Bank transfers, emails, enough to crack his image in front of the people who mattered most. But the real damage, oh, that was still waiting. When I reached our house, everything felt different. The walls looked smaller, the photographs on the mantel seemed mocking. Us smiling on vacation, holding hands in front of the Eiffel Tower, laughing with friends at a barbecue, memories framed in glass, already ghosts. I didn't cry. Not anymore. The woman who wept in the dark, begging for scraps of love, was gone. She'd been burned away. What remained was steel, cold, sharp, unbreakable. By morning, the news had spread. Claire called me first, her voice buzzing with adrenaline. "He's finished. Do you know how fast word travels in his circles? Investors are already pulling. Out? And that woman, Lauren, she looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor." I closed my eyes, letting the satisfaction wash over me. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Daniel still had resources. He still had connections. And men like him, men who built their empires on charm and lies, they didn't crumble overnight. They clawed, they fought, they manipulated until the bitter end. I had to make sure there was no end for him but the one I chose. When Daniel finally staggered through the front door 2 days later, he looked nothing like the man I'd known. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot. He smelled of whiskey and desperation. "You think you're clever?" His voice cracked, but the venom was still there. "Humiliating me in front of everyone? Do you know what you've done?" I stood at the kitchen counter, calmly slicing an apple. The knife glinted under the light. "Yes," I said softly, placing a perfect wedge onto the plate. "For once, Daniel, I know exactly what I've done." He slammed his fist against the counter, the sound sharp. "You've ruined me!" I finally looked at him, my gaze steady. "No, you ruined yourself. I just handed you the mirror." For a moment I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Real fear. But then it was gone, buried beneath rage. "You won't win. You hear me? I'll drag you down with me if I have to." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's the difference between us, Daniel. You think this is a battle. But it's already over." What he didn't know was that while he was spiraling, I was already 10 steps ahead. Claire and I had hired a private investigator weeks ago, long before the gala. Every secret meeting, every whispered phone call, every careless moment when he thought no one was watching, it was all documented. Photographs, recordings, even footage of him, slipping into hotel rooms with Lauren, his hands all over her. I wasn't just holding proof of betrayal. I was holding leverage, ammunition. The next phase wasn't about public humiliation. That part was done. No, the next phase was about dismantling him piece by piece, until there was nothing left for him to cling to. I started with his company. The investors who hadn't already pulled out needed a little nudge. Anonymous packages arrived at their offices, containing fragments of the evidence. Enough to spook them, to make them reconsider tying their fortunes to a man whose reputation was crumbling. Within a week, shares plummeted. His partners started calling emergency meetings. His empire, once towering and untouchable, began to sway. At home, he grew restless, angry. He stopped pretending around me. Some nights he screamed, hurling accusations, threats, even plates. Other nights, he drank until he collapsed on the couch, mumbling about betrayal. I watched it all with quiet detachment. Every outburst was another crack in his armor. But the most delicious moment came when Lauren abandoned him. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard the fallout. She'd confronted him in a hotel lobby, her voice shrill, calling him a liar, a fraud, a coward. Someone filmed it on their phone. Within hours, the video was circulating online. Lauren walked away, heels clicking like gunshots, leaving Daniel standing alone, humiliated in front of strangers. When Claire sent me the clip, I played it over and over, savoring every second. By then, Daniel was unraveling fast. His phone buzzed constantly with unanswered calls. Lawyers threatened lawsuits. Banks demanded explanations. He tried to corner me one evening, his face flushed, veins bulging in his neck. "You don't understand what you've started," he roared. "This isn't just about us. It's bigger. You think you're in control, but you're not. You're nothing without me." I stepped closer, so close he could see the steadiness in my eyes, the calm he'd lost. "You're wrong, Daniel. I was nothing with you. Without you, I am free." He laughed then, a hollow, broken sound, but there was no conviction behind it. He was crumbling, and he knew it. Still, I wasn't finished, because revenge isn't just about destruction. It's about replacement, about building something stronger on the ashes of what they tried to take from you. So while Daniel drowned, I rose. I applied for a position at a nonprofit I'd once dreamed of working for, years ago before marriage had clipped my wings. I reconnected with old friends, rekindled passions I'd buried. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I was living for me, and every time I stepped out of the house in the morning, dressed in confidence instead of fear, I made sure he saw. The day the foreclosure notice arrived, Daniel didn't even have the strength to shout. He just stared at the paper, his hands trembling. His kingdom was gone. His queen had walked off the board, but not before toppling his every piece. I should have felt pity. Maybe once, long ago, I would have. But as I watched him sink into the very pit he'd dug for me, I felt nothing but clarity. He had tried to erase me, to start fresh without me, but in the end, it was I who erased him. And the best part? He knew it. That was my victory, my closure, my revenge. The morning Daniel finally broke was quieter than I expected. No shouting, no slamming doors, no threats hissed through clenched teeth. Just silence, the kind that presses against your skin, heavy and unnatural. I found him sitting at the kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his eyes hollow, staring at nothing. The empire was gone. The house was days away from being reclaimed by the bank. Lauren had vanished into someone else's arms. His phone, once a constant source of buzzing power, lay abandoned on the counter, silent and dead. And him? He was just a man now. A small, pitiful man. He looked up at me as I entered, his lips cracked, his voice raw. "Why are you doing this? Haven't you taken enough?" For a moment I studied him. The man who once held my life in his hands, who decided my worth with a glance, who tried to erase me as easily as deleting a number from his phone. And now he was begging, reduced to ash. "Enough?" I repeated softly, pouring myself a glass of water. "Daniel, I haven't even begun." The truth was, revenge wasn't about tallying scores or counting wounds. It wasn't even about balance. It was about rewriting the narrative, about ensuring the story didn't end with me as the victim. I was the author now. And in my story, he didn't get redemption. The final act began quietly. Claire and I released the last wave of evidence, videos, recordings, signed contracts, all tied to the fraudulent deals Daniel had orchestrated, not just to investors this time, to journalists, to law enforcement. Within days, his name was splashed. Across headlines, not as a mogul or a philanthropist, but as a criminal. Reporters hounded him outside grocery stores, cameras flashing, microphones thrust into his face. Neighbors whispered behind curtains as squad cars parked in front of our once proud home. He went from commanding boardrooms to ducking from questions in parking lots. And me? I stayed still, silent, watching. The night they finally came for him, rain hammered the streets. Red and blue lights painted the walls as officers escorted him down the driveway in handcuffs. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles. For a split second, he turned his head, his eyes locking with mine through the window. There was no rage there anymore, no fire, just emptiness. And I smiled, because in that moment, he understood. He hadn't just lost me. He'd lost everything. After his arrest, the city buzzed with the scandal. Court dates, legal battles, endless speculation about how a man so powerful could fall so far. Strangers whispered my name in grocery stores, some with pity, others with awe. But I didn't care about their opinions. Their voices were background noise to the life I was finally building. I moved out of that house, left behind the shadows, the photographs, the echoes of a woman I no longer was. I rented a small apartment downtown, nothing grand but mine. Every corner smelled of freedom. Every piece of furniture was chosen because I liked it, not because it fit someone else's image. I painted again, something I hadn't done in years. The first canvas was messy, chaotic, streaks of red and black and white clashing in violent beauty. But when I stepped back, I saw myself in it. Broken once, but rebuilt into something unrecognizable. Claire visited often. Sometimes we laughed until our ribs ached. Other times we sat in silence, sipping wine, the comfort of her presence enough. She had been my anchor in the storm, and now she was my witness to the calm after. But Daniel wasn't gone. Not completely. Letters arrived sometimes, scrawled in his jagged handwriting, pleading, bargaining, even cursing. From his cell, he tried to claw back into my life with words. Promises of change, of love, of vengeance. I didn't open most of them. When I did, I burned them in the sink, watching the flames devour his desperation. He had wanted to erase me. But in the end, it was his name fading from memory. Months passed, seasons changed. The world moved on from Daniel's downfall, as it always does. But I carried the story inside me, not as a wound anymore, but as armor. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of orange and gold across my balcony, I realized something. Revenge hadn't just destroyed him, it had freed me. The woman who once stood in the shadows of a man's ambition was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, stronger, untouchable. Daniel would spend years behind bars, haunted by the empire he lost, the love he squandered, the legacy he destroyed. And I would spend years living, truly living for the first time. That was my revenge, not his downfall, my rebirth. And as I stood there, wineglass in hand, the city sprawling out before me, I whispered to the wind, a final eulogy for the man who thought he could erase me. You were wrong, Daniel. I am not nothing without you. You are nothing without me.